Hello. It's my honor to chair our last panel for the afternoon, and I can't think of a better topic, not that I'm biased, which we'll talk about, than trust and assurance. And I am honored to be joined by a great panel today that's going to bring a variety of government and industry perspectives to this really important topic. I was gonna say something about national security and assurance, and that's really important, but I think that point has been made. So let's get straight to the panel. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their role and talk about how their role intersects with AI, and then where they see that focus changing as this rapid progression that we're seeing in AI occurs. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. You know, the places you don't want to be is between you and lunch and you and going home, so I always appreciate when people stay for the last panel. It's good to see everybody. I'm Michelle Lopes Maldonado, and I am a recovering tech lawyer, tech business leader turned part-time state legislator. And I founded the General Assembly's Technology and Innovation Caucus and sit on our Joint Commission of Technology and Science and our AI subcommittee, as well as a national AI work group of state legislators. And I think the things that we're thinking about that are going to change and evolve over time are asking ourselves, how do we augment and not replace the human element as the technology evolves, and how do we make sure that we are having sort of equitable access, not just in terms of opportunity, but also in terms of skill development and other options across services and products.
All right, Randy.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Randy Soper. I'm the Chief of Artificial Intelligence at the Internal Revenue Service. In that role, I'm an executive in the Information Technology Organization. So at the IRS, we have a long history of data science and quite a bit of maturity in that area, and a long time working on responsible AI approaches. Our IT organization is growing and trying to sort of catch up with our data science partners. My job is really about how do I deliver scale? How do I deliver scale in artificial intelligence to the organization, bringing capabilities to the data science community, both to be able to support the full life cycle of AI and also to be able to support the technologies that we need to support assurance and responsible AI. I'm also a Hokie. I graduated mechanical engineering in 1994, and I want to just take a brief moment in remembrance of Randolph Hall.
It's a big hole. Elham.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so very much for having me among this esteemed panelists for this important event. I serve as the Chief AI Advisor at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. A quick intro to NIST. It's a non-regulatory agency under Department of Commerce with a long tradition of cultivating trust in technology. We do that by advancing measurement science and standards that make technology more reliable, more secure, more private, in other words, more trustworthy. And that's exactly what we have been doing in the space of AI. AI, of course, is not new to NIST, an agency of 120 plus years. Many of our scientists, including myself, have been doing machine learning and AI, but we put together a formal program on AI around 2018. This is about the same time that we saw explosion of a very high-level value-based document that started talking about AI being ethical, trustworthy, non-discriminatory, without really getting into what we mean by each of these words, and more importantly, how to measure for assurance for those words. So we put a program for doing fundamental research in understanding what constitutes trust, what are the trustworthy characteristics of AI systems, how to define them, how to measure them, and then we got several other tasks by administrations, by Congress. In 2023, we released the AI Risk Management Framework. That program now is the AI Innovation Lab. Our work is now focused on, again, aligned with NIST mission on measurement science and standards. And this is really important. Doing the risk management is important because we do risk management to unlock innovations, to harness the power of AI for good for everybody in an equitable way. I like to get the team, pick up on the theme of the event that talks about art of possible. So if I want to go and reflect on Bismarck Court, we are really trying to advance the art of possible, art of attainable, but also push for the next best thing in the AI governance and AI standards. Thank you.
Fantastic. Wole?
Thank you. Also very honored to be here with this esteemed panel. My name is Wole Moses, and I also feel very lucky every day because my role is all about AI. So I'm the Chief AI Officer for Microsoft Federal Civilian. And so what that means is that I get a chance to work with federal agencies to understand their requirements, to understand their needs, and most of all, to understand their vision for how they want to transform the way that they deliver services to citizens. And so as part of that engagement and conversations with government, we get a chance to think through what are the right use cases for the application of AI. And part of that conversation is obviously also around responsible AI and ensuring that we conform to the White House executive order and the NIST risk management framework in the adoption of AI. And so the last thing I'll say is that it's a really exciting time to be focused on AI if you work anywhere within the government space, because I've been at Microsoft for 25 years and I've never seen the federal government lean in and adopt a technology as quickly as I've seen them do so with AI, and so especially with generative AI, and so it's really an exciting time.
Fantastic. So that's a fantastic backdrop to my next question, which is about the frameworks that we're building to lead to that trust and assurance in AI. So Ilham, you already, well, we've heard twice now about the NIST, well, 3 times if you count Senator Warner's comments, about the RMF framework that NIST has developed in the executive order. Can you talk a little bit more about what role these standards play in fostering public confidence in AI technologies?
Yeah, happy to. So standards, first I have to make a clarification that while standard is our middle name, we are not standard development organizations such as ISO, IEEE, but we work with the community to kind of build those technical building blocks that are needed for development of the standards, and we develop the frameworks that are being used by government and broader. Standards play a really important role in all sorts of technology, particularly emerging technologies like AI, by sort of providing the rules of the road, some sort of harmonized, interoperable rules of the road, by providing specifications and definitions for what to test and how to test them, to allow us to kind of assure that the technology is working safe, working reliably, and that assurance that this technology is safe and reliable and secure and private brings more adoptions and more confidence in the technology. And as technology gets more adopted, this cycle of learning more about the technology, learning more about their positive and negative consequences, the type of safeguards that's needed, the type of mitigations that's needed, the knowledge of that increase, and with that cycle of better standards and better frameworks to propel technology forward in a way that, we keep hearing that AI is transforming our society, but we also want to make sure that it uplifts all of us and the whole society as it's transformed. And that's what standards and frameworks can do.
Thank you. Randy, could you tell us a little bit about how the IRS is thinking about frameworks and standards in your life?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, NIST's definition of how we need to be approaching risk is really fundamental to the way that we think about AI risk at the IRS. The AI executive order made it clear what our responsibilities were in terms of reporting. The challenge for us is, again, how do we do these things efficiently and effectively, right? So this goes back to scalability, because AI, the promise of AI is the efficiency and effectiveness that it can bring to mission workflows. But if we get in the way of that by putting bureaucratic processes that slow us down, that can be really problematic because it's contrary to the intent of the technology and the value that it can deliver. So how do we look at this? I think one challenge that we have right now is there's a tendency to sort of think about these problems with an old mindset and fall back on committees and paperwork, documentation, and those kinds of things to be able to provide justifications to move forward, and failing to learn the lessons of what's going on in software development lifecycle. So if you look at software development lifecycle as a paradigm for how to provide assurance efficiently and effectively and accelerate delivery while staying within guardrails, that's the paradigm. It's not the same risks. It needs to be modified. It needs to be understood within the context of AI, but that should be the goal. We need to prefer automation in assurance, to prefer continuous monitoring, to prefer logging over business process controls and over documentation and those kinds of things. I think the other piece of it is, as a data scientist, I bought in wholeheartedly to the concept that we pushed really hard, which is that data science is a multidisciplinary art, and that we need to understand everything in a multidisciplinary way. And we pushed that. It was needful at the time that we did it to be able to grow the understanding and skills within data science teams to be able to deliver effective solutions. Now we're at a point where we want to be able to scale, to be able to deliver AI into enterprise systems. And the problem is large organizations don't operate on ad hoc multidisciplinary teams. That's another thing that just slows us down. So how can we take the life cycle of artificial intelligence? How can we take the needs for governance of artificial intelligence and understand what parts can be rendered back to our existing governance frameworks? There's so many things that fall back to basic project management within an AI system, to basic cybersecurity, to basic data security. Those things, we have to look at them and say, do these frameworks cover the specific needs of AI? If so, they need to be adjusted. But otherwise, how can we leverage the existing frameworks that we have to cover as much of the problem as we need, and then just add what's new? How do we add what's new? Identify those areas where we need multidisciplinarianism, where we need agile teams, and plan for those ahead so that we can deliver rapidly. Those are the kinds of things that we're doing right now at IRS. We built the framework to be able to do AI governance, but we're getting better at how do we manage GOTS, government-built models, versus COTS, tools that we're buying, versus those enterprise platforms that we have where our providers are seeing value in adding AI to the platform as a new release. There are multiple ways that AI can come into the organization, and we need to be able to manage risk across all of those paradigms.
Thank you. Great lead-in, I think, to the future-proofing question that I have for Wole, in that you have to do all that to future-proof. But we've heard a lot at this workshop about how AI innovation is advancing rapidly. How, in your role at Microsoft, are you keeping pace with the change, and what risk factors need to be mitigated to future-proof these AI capabilities that you're bringing in the federal space?
Yeah, great question. So you're right. The pace of innovation in AI has been breathtaking, especially with the advent of generative AI just 2 years ago. So it's a great question because it's very difficult to keep up with the pace of change. On the one hand, I'm fortunate in that I work for a tech company that's one of the companies at the center of a lot of the innovation that's happening, which means that I get the benefit of learning and also a view to the future based on the work that our engineering and product teams are doing. But on the other hand, you never want to get too insular and sort of have just one perspective and exist in that bubble. And so for me, at least, the other way that I gain other perspectives and learn a lot and keep up to date is through my professional network, primarily through LinkedIn. And so through LinkedIn, I see things that people are sharing and posting. It offers lots of new perspectives, sometimes new information that I may not see internally. But overall, it's tough. There's not really one answer. I'm curious as to how others are keeping up with the pace of change, again, especially with the advent of generative AI. It's really tough.
Yeah, I think there's a huge role for communities of interest that span various sectors of industry, government, academia, in keeping pace and kind of sharing those best practices. I agree with you. I log into LinkedIn and I'm like, oh, that happened? Cool. Switching to a little bit more of the government perspective, Michelle, we've heard about the executive order. You're a Virginia state delegate. Can you share your thoughts on what the role of state and federal organizations play in enabling trust in AI technologies?
Absolutely. I love this question because I always preface it by saying that government moves at the speed of molasses and technology moves at the speed of light. And so how do you close the gap responsibly, thoughtfully, and strategically? And that is the intersecting place where we have a role. And so what you're seeing across the country, while many state legislators are waiting for a uniform sort of solution at the federal level, is trying to stitch together a framework, a tapestry where it doesn't leave industry trying to comply with a patchwork of different and conflicting legislation or policies. So I think what we have to do is, particularly at the state level, we're in a unique place to help inform what happens at local and to help support and move forward efforts at the federal level. So at the state level, particularly in Virginia, we have a number of things going forward, and I think you'll see them. You may have seen things that happened in Colorado. Colorado just passed its very first AI bill. You would see what happened in California with its 1047 and 2013 bills around safe AI and transparency. So we have to look at privacy first and foremost, because no matter what happens, if we're talking about AI, we're talking about quantum computing, we're talking about HR systems, privacy and data is always going to be at the core. And so we can't lose sight of the importance of protecting data and perhaps evolving some of the definitions around sensitive information, around having uniform definitions around what is artificial intelligence systems, all those things. So consequential decision-making and algorithmic discrimination. We need to have consistency across the board, and that's a good place for legislators and policyholders to start.
Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about the presidential election and how AI has maybe not been as present as we thought it was earlier. We've also talked about national security. Each of you represents certain interests as well. This panel is about assurance, and an important part of that are ethics and bias. So I'm curious to each of your perspectives on detecting and mitigating bias in AI systems and how you're thinking about that in your workflow. Well, Elham, can I start with you?
Sure, happy to talk to that. So this is a really important topic because as we heard today, this panel and other panels, AI systems are being trained on the data. So any type of the biases that are in the data are going to get them into the systems. Back in March 2022, we put a document out towards the standards for bias in AI. And in that document, we talk about that bias is more than computational and statistical bias. The demographic disparity, we at NIST look at the bias in face recognition, but the first thing that we report was just demographic disparity. And the document talks about bias being more than just computational and statistical bias and other form of bias such as cognitive bias and systemic bias has to be also understood and get into the consideration. Systemic bias is that if you do a absolutely valid statistical representations of the data, our data is going to turn out to be biased, and that bias gets baked into the systems. Mm-hmm. And cognitive bias talks about the things such as confirmation bias. Each of us as individuals process the information differently. We bring our own sets of belief and understanding into the understanding, interpreting, acting on the results of the AI system recommendation and prediction that they bring. So it becomes really important. Fast forward to the AI-RMF. AI-RMF, as you all know, is a voluntary framework for managing the risk of AI in a structured, flexible, and measurable manner. In the structure part of that, it talks about the different characteristics of the trustworthiness, where bias is one of them, but we emphasize on harmful bias, because sometimes if you just go with the definition of statistical and computational bias, you may want to built-in bias. An example of that is car insurance is, the amount is different based on the age of the driver and experience of the driver. So that's a good thing that is being built into that. But the reason I mentioned that is bringing AI-RMF in is that the trustworthiness characteristic that we, with the work with the community, came up to the 7 characteristics of valid and reliable, safe, secure, and resilient, privacy enhanced, explainable and interpretable, fair with harmful bias managed, transparent and accountable. These components there are trade-offs among them and they influence each other. So understanding the bias requires understanding the privacy and security. So we need a more wholesome approach to all of those things. And the last thing in topic that I want to also bring up, or maybe 2 things. First, I want to say that I really enjoyed the last panel, and there was a reference where Sarah talked about How about we start thinking about how to design systems and technology that works? So I always say that we want a technology that's easy to do the right thing, difficult to do the wrong thing, and easy to recover if something bad or something wrong go on. So how about we understand biases that can creep in and mitigations of those, not as a sort of a bolt-on after the system was in the place, discover them through evaluations and assurance mechanisms and put policy around them to avoid them. But how about we start thinking about them into the design of the data that we use, into the design of the models that we use. And to that end, and to sort of furthering AI standards, and that's my last point here, is that earlier this week, Tuesday and Thursday, we had a AI symposium, a series of panel conversations, basically talking about the documents, the work that we delivered as part of the executive order tasks that we had, and sort of discuss with the community next steps of the things that we have to do. And one of the tasks that we had as part of the EO was developing a plan for global engagement on AI standards. And there is a lot of really good laws and policy in place. There are really good rules and processes for the different standard development organizations. But in consultation building that draft, we learned or relearned the things that we know. And the things that we know is that we need to bring the researchers and scientists together to build the scientific underpinning, the technical building blocks for development of the good standards. We need to have a broader engagements that are not just the people that go to the standard meeting, but include civil society, research community on developing standards. And we need to work with the community on building the tools that's needed for implementation and adoption of standards. So to furthering this goal and to sort of augmenting and complementing the really good work that the standard development organizations are doing, we will be very soon announcing some sort of a convening and collaboration with the whole community on doing the research to build the scientific building blocks, work with the SDOs to move those knowledge into standard development process. And one of the topics on the table is the issue of the bias in AI. So we are really excited about that, and please consider this as an invitation to all of you to join us in the effort that we're going to announce very soon.
Fantastic. I'm sure there'll be lots of Virginia Tech researchers that are interested. Wole, what's your perspective on how you think about bias mitigation and the ethical deployment of AI from Microsoft?
Yeah, so for us, we provide platforms and tools, and so we are building within our tool set both. We design our tool sets from the beginning to ensure that they are responsible and ethical in the way that they're designed. But then as a company that provides platforms for others to build on top of, we also provide tools for organizations who are using our platforms to assess risk, measure the risk, and to do safety testing all along the way so that they can deploy safely and be confident. In the context of the federal government, we're aligned to the risk management framework, and so our tools from the very beginning are aligned there, and we are doing a lot of work with government agencies to ensure that they can align with that framework in the delivery of platforms and applications that they build on top of our tools.
Michelle, what perspective do you bring to this conversation?
So I think we have to sort of step back and think about the lens through which we view the work we're doing. And so I'm a big fan of creating acronyms because that's how my brain works to remember them. And so the one lens that I refer to as RU, R-R-U. So a lot of times people ask, is this a risk categories framework or is this a rights category framework? And I say, stop with the binary thinking. This is a yes and conversation. So RU is risks, rights, and use cases. And so the risks are going to evolve over time as the technology evolves, but the rights are durable. These are the human rights, the civil rights, all those things that we always want to make sure we protect. And then the use cases are going to ladder up to them. So if we keep that in mind, we can start with the developer community and the deployer community. There are also integrators and controllers of the data. But with the deployers, making sure that they are conducting really robust and consistent impact assessments. They do it at the time that they develop it and before they give it over to a deployer, and also continuously, so anytime there's a major update. And that way, we can start to pull and identify and create snapshots, dashboards around adverse and disparate impacts that may fall into the category of algorithmic discrimination or bias.
Fantastic, thank you. So Randy, in our prep sessions, you mentioned that human-machine teaming is an important part of your background. I want to highlight that Elhelm flagged, that we can engineer systems to be a little more robust and more resilient and mitigate those biases. I'm curious as to your perspective, how you got involved in the human-machine teaming piece of this, and what role it plays in the current shift towards generative AI and making sure our systems are assured.
Yeah, it's a great question because human-machine teaming is consuming a lot of my sort of focus at the moment. But let me give you a little bit on sort of where this came from. So when I've had moments of artificial intelligence at various points in my career.
You personally?
Yeah, no. Me personally, I had the first neural network and genetic algorithms that I built were back in 1998 for Virginia Tech as a grad student, and I didn't know I was doing AI at the time. I thought I was doing design optimization because I was a mechanical engineer, so we won't count that. But anyway, so along the way, I backed my return to AI, if you will, was when I was working for the intelligence community, and there was a lot of frustration about the ability to bring artificial intelligence into intelligence production workflows. And so what was going on is people were bringing AI to the intelligence community, and they were saying, here's this great capability. It brings huge insight to your analysts. And people would look at it and they'd say, this is great, but then it wouldn't go anywhere. These projects wouldn't go anywhere, and people really couldn't figure out why. And the reality is you have to look at what's the difference between information and intelligence. And it's really a kind of a wonky government thing. Intelligence is defined by law. There's a law that defines the Intelligence Reform and Counterterrorism Prevention Act that says what intelligence is as a workflow. So there's a policy-compliant workflow that requires you to do critical thinking in the way in which you build an intelligence product and that you document your work as the artifacts associated with that product. And so insight is a wonderful thing for intelligence. It gives a lot of quality to the final product, but it's the left end of the workflow. It's the first thing that an intelligence analyst does at the beginning of their day. And the reality of artificial intelligence, if it can't be policy compliant, if it can't fit into the workflow, it's not doing anything to the work, the actual work that someone who's in a highly regulated industry or a government context does. And so there was really no room in the program. You couldn't buy any artificial intelligence because it didn't replace anything that you were already buying. So that was a real challenge, and I helped people understand from a policy standpoint what we needed to do to design artificial intelligence in a way that made it fit the needs of the users for fitting into a government workflow. That's responsible AI back before it was cool, back before it had a name, right? And so that's kind of how I got involved in this idea of human-machine teaming, because it had to do with how does the output of the artificial intelligence have to support critical thinking of analysts? And it's really sort of fundamentally important to how you get quality results in decision-making. And it made me think a lot about what do we need to be able to do to design AI to better support critical thinking tasks. Fast forward, where are we now? So we've been talking a lot about AI risk management, about frameworks, about trust. There's this real sort of differentiation between traditional AI ML and generative AI, which is something fundamentally new. It's not new technologically, it's new in the way it's scale and its packaging. It's new in the way in which it is consumed. It is a third-party product that you have to bring across the boundary into your enterprise in some way. I either have to ship data to it, or I have to rehost it as an open source capability into my enterprise. How do I gain trust around this black box, this thing that has a package of capability, huge capability, and huge risks that are very hard to unpack? If you focus on the system, If you just focus on the technology, you've got a real challenge. It's hard to justify according to our governance frameworks. It's hard to even establish up front what the ROI is to be able to justify moving forward on a project. What you've got to do is take a step back and consider the human-machine system and say, I'm going to build my justifications based on the output of the human and machine cooperating together. If I work in that way and I say, I'm going to run an experiment, I'm going to put all this into a safe, contained place where I can understand the impact of this technology on a specific workflow, instrument that sandbox in a way that I can understand what's going on, measure efficiency, effectiveness, and risk, and build data as a basis for making further decisions. That's the kind of data you need to be able to justify scaling according to the risk management frameworks that we've been talking about. So it really is still very much about how the machine and the human work together. I'll just end with this. Think about where we're headed. So imagine a future where the AI is fully capable of absolutely and correctly answering any question you can ask it. What is the role of the human being in that future? The reality is critical thinking is still incredibly important. It becomes about asking the right question and being able to understand the answer that has been provided. And so critical thinking is sort of becoming the most important part of the relationship between the human and the machine as we move forward.
Fantastic. So, Wole, it must be an exciting time to be at Microsoft in the AI space, especially with the context that you gave me. The government's really going all in on a lot of this. Microsoft made a big bet on AI. What excites you about where you're the future and where you're going next?
Yeah, so definitely big investment. We're continuing to make big investments. So I'd say a couple of different things excite me. So maybe I'll talk about this in terms of how I use some of the AI technology myself, and then how I see government agencies using it. And so in terms of, one example of how I'm using AI is we have a tool called Microsoft Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is essentially a digital assistant. Everyone gets a digital assistant that can reason over everything you do within your Microsoft 365 environment. And so it's extremely powerful. And Randy made the point about human AI collaboration. That's essentially what it is. And so now I have a personal assistant that at the beginning of the day can help me prioritize what I work on. It can help me figure out what I committed to do, but I may have not done, what I missed. And then my favorite implementation of it is within Microsoft Teams. And so within Teams, there's a Copilot which can, in the times where I'm late for a meeting, or I miss a meeting altogether because I'm double booked, or it happens way more often than I would like to admit. Sometimes my mind wanders within a meeting. Mm-hmm. Within seconds, I can have it catch me up on everything I missed. I can ask about, what did Randy say and what was his perspective on this particular topic? Are there any threads of conversations that we started that we didn't complete that we need to follow back up on? What are the key action items? And so in this way, this particular tool creates massive opportunities for productivity gains. And so that's something that I use every day. The government version will be available in just about 2 weeks. Randy and I were chatting about that earlier. And so that's one thing I'm excited about. The other thing is, so we have a platform within Azure, and we provide APIs and tools such as the Azure OpenAI platform to enable our government customers to build bespoke AI solutions on top of. And so I'm excited because we're seeing just unbelievable usage and a lot of creativity within government agencies around how they're using this platform to build new capabilities and build new tools that radically create efficiencies, help them rethink the way certain processes have traditionally happened, and they can now do these in a digital way. And so that is a pretty exciting experience to be able to work with these government leaders and government agencies to walk through the way things were done in the past, and the way things can be done in the future, and the way things are happening in the future with the assistance of AI.
Thank you. All right, we've reached the lightning round. So in my final question, I'll ask for just a very quick response. And as we look for the future of AI, what is the most important question we should ask ourselves to ensure technology serves and protects the public good? Michelle, I'll start with you.
Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I think that we have to ask ourselves a question, should we do it? Not just how do we do it? And then think about, is the future really in large language models because of all the power, the energy, all the resources required to stand them up and support them and sustain them? Or are we going to see, or maybe it's and, we're going to see much more growth in small language models? So and how do we manage that?
Fantastic. Randy?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing we can do right now with generative AI to ensure that it is going to be responsibly used and that we get the best value out of it is to make sure we're picking the right use cases and we have the right approach to how we're selecting use cases. We need to lean into the creative power of generative AI. We often forget that its intent is to be generative. Focus on those areas where we can build virtual assistants, where we have the appropriate human oversight, and the focus is not on creating accurate content, but adding efficiency to workflows. Just as Molly said, I think that's really important.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I love the answers so far. The creativity and just because we can, we shouldn't do, and that the thought process that we have to bring on all those decision makings. And I think the gap that we have to be able to do the implement the good advices that we heard is that we don't really know how to measure AI systems. So answering the question of should we, is it responsible, how to measure the AI, is it responsible, is it trustworthy, is it safe, is it secure? So we need to really build that science of AI evaluations to be able to get us there. So, and I think that's the, I agree that we want AI to be incorporated into our everyday life. Again, as it transforms the society, improves our life, lifts us up. And we don't want every time keep asking the questions about it. It's good to have that, critical thinking about this, but we also need to be able to somehow trust the technology the way that now we are trusting all of the electricity around us working on. So I think that is the biggest thing that we have to work on.
Thank you. Molly, you want to close us out?
Sure. I'd say at this moment in time, I think the most important thing is to strike a balance. So I think most of what we've been talking about today has been risk and trustworthy AI, and that's great. We need to be very thoughtful about how we think about the application of AI in a trustworthy way. However, I do think there's also a risk of us becoming risk averse and swinging the pendulum too far into the direction of fear and cautiousness. And that the risk of that is American competitiveness, as well as the risk that we don't deliver innovative public services to Americans, which, by the way, impacts how they view their government. And so I think it's really about striking that balance between doing things responsibly, using the frameworks that we already have, but also being bold in exploring and embarking on the possibilities of what AI can do in terms of transforming the way that we work and all the things we do today.
Well, thank you all so much for all the insights today and rounding out the panels for this workshop. Please join me in thanking the panelists.